It started with spilled milk, literally. On an otherwise mundane Tuesday morning, the quaint Catfish Café in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, was abuzz with the usual crowd of hurried customers, caffeine-deprived regulars, and the tantalizing aroma of fresh beignets and French-pressed coffee. But as Dakota Miller, the cafe's sharp-tongued barista, leaned over the counter, her narrowed blue eyes zeroed in on Priya Bennett, her co-worker of just 6 months, something snapped. "You forgot the soy in Table 3's latte," Dakota hissed, her lips curling in mock disdain. "You know, some of us actually care about standards here." Priya, a poised and graceful black woman in her late 20s, looked up from the steaming milk pitcher in her hand. Her dark brown eyes, warm as honey, flicked to Dakota's sneer. She'd seen this before. The passive-aggressive comments, the subtle digs, the misplaced orders mysteriously piling up whenever Dakota worked her shift. Priya had learned to let it slide, most of the time. But today, Dakota didn't stop at words. As Priya reached for the pitcher, Dakota accidentally knocked over an entire gallon of milk, spilling it down the front of Priya's pristine uniform. Gasps rippled through the cafe as customers and staff froze mid-sip and step. The cold liquid soaked Priya's shirt, cascading down her apron and pooling on the floor. Dakota's face twisted into a smug grin. "Oh, oops," Dakota said, feigning concern. "Clumsy me." Priya could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, but she took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay composed. This wasn't the first time she'd been humiliated at work, but it was the first time Dakota had gone this far, and in front of so many witnesses. The Catfish Café wasn't just a job for Priya, it was a lifeline. After losing her husband in a tragic car accident 2 years ago, Priya had moved back to Baton Rouge with her young daughter Amara to be closer to family. Working double shifts at the cafe allowed her to keep the lights on, pay for Amara's school supplies, and save for a better future. Her colleagues often marveled at her work ethic and resilience, but Dakota saw her as a threat. Dakota, on the other hand, wasn't struggling with loss but with her own bitterness. At 23, she felt stuck. Her dreams of moving to New Orleans and landing a lucrative position in marketing seemed farther away than ever. She despised her job at the cafe and envied Priya's ability to shine even in the face of adversity. When management announced a new Employee of the Month program with a $1,000 bonus, Dakota saw her way out. The bonus would cover her rent and give her a chance to leave Baton Rouge for good. But there was one problem. Priya was a clear favorite for the award. Dakota's campaign to secure the bonus began with small acts of sabotage. She tampered with Priya's inventory logs, accidentally served cold coffee to Priya's regulars, and even spread a rumor that Priya had been caught texting during shifts. Priya, ever the professional, ignored the pettiness and focused on her work. But the spilled milk incident changed everything. Customers began whispering about Dakota's behavior, and one particularly vocal patron, an elderly woman named Mrs. Clara, even reported the incident to the manager. Still, Dakota wasn't done. She devised a bold plan to humiliate Priya during the upcoming staff meeting. If she could make Priya lose her temper in front of the manager, the bonus would surely be hers. On the day of the meeting, the cafe was unusually quiet. Priya arrived early, as always, her hair neatly braided and her uniform spotless, despite the lingering memory of spilled milk. Dakota sauntered in late, her platinum blonde ponytail swinging as she plopped into a chair and smirked across the room. The manager, a kind but no-nonsense man named Mr. Jackson, began by praising the staff's hard work. Then he dropped the bombshell. The Employee of the Month winner would be announced at the end of the week, based on customer feedback and team votes. As the meeting wrapped up, Dakota struck. "Mr. Jackson," she said, feigning innocence, "I think it's worth noting that some people here have been cutting corners, like taking extra breaks or forgetting to clock out." Priya's heart sank. She knew where this was going. Priya, Dakota continued, turning to her. I don't mean to single you out, but I've noticed a few inconsistencies. Gasps echoed around the room and Priya felt all eyes on her. But before she could respond, Mr. Jackson raised a hand. Thank you, Dakota, he said firmly. But let's focus on facts, not speculation. As the week progressed, Priya stayed true to her values. She greeted every customer with a smile, helped colleagues who were falling behind, and even covered Dakota's shift when she called in sick. Her kindness didn't go unnoticed. On Friday, the cafe was packed for the announcement. Priya stood near the counter, her daughter Amara peeking shyly from behind her legs. Dakota leaned casually against the wall, confident she had done enough to secure the bonus. Mr. Jackson stepped forward, holding an envelope. This month's winner has not only excelled in customer service, but has also shown exceptional teamwork and resilience. Congratulations, Priya Bennett. The cafe erupted into applause. Tears welled in Priya's eyes as she accepted the envelope. Amara beamed with pride, clapping enthusiastically. Dakota's face turned pale, her jaw tightening as she forced a strained smile. The humiliation stung, but what happened next shook her to her core. As the crowd dispersed, Dakota approached Priya. For a moment it looked like she might hurl another insult, but instead she hesitated. Look, Dakota said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry for everything. I've been a terrible person. Priya studied her for a long moment. She could see the regret in Dakota's eyes, the vulnerability beneath her bravado. Taking a deep breath, Priya extended her hand. We all make mistakes, she said softly. It's what we do next that matters. Dakota shook her hand, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. In that moment, something shifted. The rivalry dissolved, replaced by a mutual understanding. The bonus allowed Priya to enroll Amara in an advanced learning program and start saving for a home of their own. Dakota, inspired by Priya's grace, began volunteering at a local shelter and eventually left the cafe to pursue her marketing dreams. The Catfish Café became a symbol of resilience and redemption, a place where two women from different worlds learned that even spilled milk can lead to something beautiful. Sometimes the most unexpected moments, like a gallon of milk splashing across a uniform, can change everything. And sometimes the people we least expect can teach us the greatest lessons of all. The Catfish Café had never been busier. Priya stood behind the counter, her uniform freshly ironed and her signature calm demeanor intact. It had been 2 weeks since the infamous milk incident, and though the cafe seemed to have returned to normal, there was an unspoken tension lingering between Priya and Dakota. Customers whispered, employees exchanged knowing looks, and even the manager, Mr. Jackson, kept a close eye on their interactions. That afternoon, Priya noticed something strange. A man in a sharp navy blue suit, clearly out of place in the casual cafe, sat in the corner with a tablet. He observed everything: Dakota's aggressive mannerisms, Priya's professionalism, and the subtle dynamics among the staff. He didn't order anything, but his presence was impossible to ignore. By 3 p.m., the cafe had slowed, and Priya found herself restocking supplies in the back. She was deep in thought when she heard a loud crash from the front. Rushing out, she saw Dakota standing over a shattered coffee pot, her face red with frustration. I told you to keep this area clear, Dakota shouted at Priya, though it was obvious she'd been the one to drop it. Why is it so hard for you to follow simple instructions? The cafe fell silent as customers and staff watched the confrontation unfold. Priya opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the man in the navy suit stood up and cleared his throat. Excuse me, he said, his voice calm but commanding. I've seen enough. Dakota spun around, her anger quickly replaced by confusion. Who are you? she demanded. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. Richard Coleman, Senior Operations Auditor for the Catfish Café corporate office. I've been conducting an internal investigation after receiving multiple complaints about workplace behavior at this location. Gasps rippled through the room. Dakota's face turned pale as the weight of his words sank in. Richard turned to Priya. Ms. Bennett, your professionalism and resilience have been remarkable. I've reviewed surveillance footage and customer feedback, and it's clear that you've been subjected to unacceptable treatment. On behalf of the company, I sincerely apologize. Priya blinked, her surprise evident. She hadn't expected this level of recognition, let alone from someone so high up. Then Richard turned to Dakota. Ms. Miller, your behavior has been documented extensively. Your hostility toward both staff and customers violates our company's values. Effective immediately, you're terminated. Dakota's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You can't do this, she sputtered. I've been here for years. I can and I am, Richard replied firmly. The evidence speaks for itself. As Dakota stormed out of the cafe, Priya felt a mix of relief and disbelief. But what happened next left her speechless. Ms. Bennett, Richard said, turning back to her. We're not done here. Your dedication and resilience haven't gone unnoticed. We're offering you a promotion to store manager, effective immediately, with a significant pay increase. Priya's hands flew to her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. Are you serious? She whispered. Very serious, Richard said with a warm smile. And there's more. We'd also like to sponsor your enrollment in a professional development program, fully funded by the company. It's time your talent and leadership were properly recognized. The cafe erupted into applause. Regular customers, co-workers, and even Mr. Jackson clapped enthusiastically. Amara, who had been quietly coloring at a corner table, ran to her mother and hugged her tightly. As the dust settled and Priya began to process her newfound success, the door to the cafe opened. A familiar figure walked in, Dakota. But something was different. Her eyes were puffy, and her expression was no longer one of anger, but of vulnerability. Priya, Dakota began, her voice trembling. I know I have no right to ask for anything after the way I treated you, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. Truly. Losing this job made me realize how toxic I've been, and I want to change. I hope you can forgive me. Priya looked at Dakota, her heart torn. Then she took a deep breath and said, Forgiveness isn't about excusing what you did. It's about letting go so we can both move forward. I forgive you, Dakota. The two women shook hands, and for the first time, Dakota's smile was genuine. In the weeks that followed, the cafe flourished under Priya's leadership. She used her promotion to create a supportive environment for her team, ensuring that no one else would experience what she had endured. The professional development program allowed her to pursue new opportunities, and within a year, she was managing multiple locations across the state. As for Dakota, she took Priya's words to heart. She started therapy, found a new job, and began volunteering at a local shelter, determined to make amends for her past behavior. The Catfish Café became more than just a coffee shop. It became a symbol of resilience, redemption, and the power of standing up for what's right. And so, what started with spilled milk turned into a life-changing moment for everyone involved. You won't believe how one black mom turned humiliation into triumph and changed a toxic workplace forever.